Good afternoon, everyone. I'm so excited to be here. It's office hours with me and my mentor, learn.blainebartlett.com/LMM. He's the mindset mastermind, taking control of the mind, the heart, and the handset, practical advice. And speaking of all three of those realms, we are so blessed to have Kindra Hall here.
Yes.
And he is the chief storytelling officer of Success Magazine. And what I love about that and her new book is that I believe life is about lessons. And the way that we teach and tell lessons is through stories. And not only stories we tell others, but even more importantly, the stories that we tell ourselves. And we need to choose our own stories, both externally and internally. And that's truly what your book is about, Kindra, understanding not only the stories that we tell ourselves and others, but how we tell them is so important. And so, as the chief storytelling officer of an amazing publication and a great author, how did you figure out this idea of stories and lessons and how they contribute and impact our lives?
Yeah, I was one of those people that my career found me, right? Like I didn't find it, it found me. And it was at the end of my high school career and I entered a national storytelling competition. Yes, they have
Wow.
this. And
I missed out.
I know. Who knew?
Here, yeah.
Right?
Wow. Who knew?
Who knew? But I entered and I won. Now I was 18. I was hoping there would be like a car or like a cash prize, but it wasn't. The big prize was you got to tell a story at the National Storytelling Festival, which again, you may or may not know that there is one of those. But I remember going to this festival. It happens in this teeny tiny town in Tennessee, and they put up these huge circus tents and they bring in professional storytellers. Now, these aren't business people. They are really people who are there, who have the natural ability to see life's moments, as we're talking about here, and see the true purpose in them, the value in them. So I was sitting in the audience under these circus tents, listening to these storytellers, and not only blown away by how the stories were uniting an entire audience, but also fascinated and really intrigued and also very excited about their seeing these really small moments from in some cases decades ago. Maybe it was the show and tell day in second grade and telling a whole story about it and how that brings so much meaning to our lives. So I think that's when I first realized there is something really amazing here. And ever since then, I've been researching, studying, and teaching the power of stories, both outward stories that we tell and the stories we tell ourselves.
Wow.
Yeah, that's very cool. Yeah, the title of your book struck me when I first saw it. Choose your story, change your life. And it intrigued me for this reason. Everybody's got a story and everybody is a story, whether you're a company or whether you're an individual. And in the work that I do with leaders, it became very obvious real early on in my work with them that the story of who they are gets in the room before they do. And then people spend probably 90% of the meeting interacting with that story before they ever get to the person that is carrying that story. Disabusing other people of the validity of that story is oftentimes a lot of the work that I end up doing because that story doesn't serve anymore, which is the last part of that title. Change your life, change your story, change your life. How difficult do you find it to be to change the story? And I ask this out of curiosity. I've spent probably 30 years working with people to do this. So I'd love somebody that is steeped in this to actually comment on this.
It's been fascinating because it can be varied. So if there's a belief that you have about yourself and it's really rooted within you and it's something that you've held on to and you've been collecting evidence, memories of previous experiences or things that happen in your day to day, and it's all gathered together. I call it kind of the mass of the iceberg that's underneath the surface of the water. So it's in our subconscious. Sometimes really big stories take time to shift and change and get to that place where they're actually serving us. So I had a limiting story for a long time that was really robbing me of professional excellence and happiness. And that was that anytime my career was thriving, it meant that I was failing as a mother. And so I went through a whole period where my career was, and it's still, it's great, but when it was just taking off, and I could barely enjoy it because every time it did, I was thinking I'm failing my kids. And I had all these stories about how I had failed my kids, things that I had missed, things that I didn't do. I also had all the stories of the mother I had, whose entire goal and ambition was to be home with us. So now I'm doing something the opposite. It was such a mess. And it took a lot of time and effort for me to pinpoint very specific moments as a mother where I was actually doing awesome and retelling myself those stories on a regular, anytime I felt that old story coming up, to quiet it with these other stories that could bring it back down. It took a couple of years to get that under control. Now I feel pretty good about it. I've also seen people who had a story that they figured out, they didn't even know they'd been telling themselves. And it was it could be an instantaneous change. Oh, that story's wrong. I have this story instead. I'm going to choose this one and it's over. So it's varied. It depends on how big, how old, what area of life the stories are.
And Kindra, one of the other interesting things, you had your first bestseller, which was Stories That Stick. And we're talking about the conscious and subconscious level of stories and what impact they have on us and what limitations they put on us because of what we've told ourselves. One of the interesting things that as I get older and more experienced that I'm studying is the energetic and genetic inheritance of stories, the unconscious competencies, a quantum chain that people talk about, breaking the chain of this. And it's so hard to raise our awareness, especially if we're younger. We don't have repetition and experience in this quantum ability that we have and disability. How can we utilize the stories that we tell in order to break this chain of the energetic and genetic inheritance of the unconscious realm that some people don't even believe in, but I know in my heart and soul and mind are extremely influential in what I do internally and externally by looking at the patterns of my genetics and my energetic inheritance?
Well, first of all, will you please send me what you've been looking at? Because as I was working on this, I'm like, there is a whole other realm here that I'm curious about. I'm like, wait a second. I think there's a lot more, right? I'm like, we're at one point, but I think it's something either deeper or broader. So please send me that information. For anyone who's skeptical of that, what I would say about this approach, this methodology, and what I appreciate about it for myself is this is what we're looking for are concrete stories. They're things that we have experienced. They are actual events. There may be events from our past that we remember. They may be stories that are happening right here in front of us. If you have a limiting story that the world is out to get you, and some people carry that story with them, right? And that can be handed down in a variety of different ways. The world is out to get me. The world is out to get me. Maybe that story served you for a while. Maybe it no longer does. If you're ready to change that, then to be looking around and say, oh, that person is actually there to support me. I'm going to solidify this person who came out of nowhere to help me with this situation. And I'm going to retell myself this story to help alleviate some of the previous ones. So if you're someone who it's something you can't see, it's too far out there, you need something more concrete, that's what these stories are all about. And it will help make that progress regardless.
The epigenetical construct that David's talking about there is very powerful. And I'm going to just take that and go a little bit more meta with it in the context of business. This book over my shoulder here, David and I co-wrote this, Compassionate Capitalism. And the story about capitalism, and this is, compassionate capitalism strikes people as an oxymoron. How can capitalism be compassionate? Well, there's a story embedded in the way that people think about business today that is not serving anybody. So I'm curious in terms of some of the because you work with some fairly large companies. Yes, from a strategic perspective, positioning their story as a go-to-market strategy. What are you noticing that companies are wanting to have crafted, and how much of their DNA is actually either facilitating or compromising a different story that might be more in alignment with a compassionately capitalistic approach to doing business?
I think that anytime, so now there is a lot more awareness of the importance of storytelling in a go-to-market strategy, right? Like this is how the big brands become who they are. And I think that where, we have to, all of my work has been in true stories. It always needs to be about the true stories. And you can see when there is an organization there that maybe isn't compassionate, it is difficult. Like the stories don't always align. And when they start trying to create fiction, that becomes even more problematic. My recommendation always for an organization, and the many that I've worked with, is when looking for a story to communicate what you're really about, instead of going big and broad and trying to encompass and share all the values, to go back to one moment in time, the moment the realization happened that this is something that could be something, and to focus on that piece of the story. Because I think with any companies start for a reason. There's a problem that needs to be solved. There's a just like children are born into the world, there's the twinkle in the eye, right? Like what? Mm-hmm. And so I think that then on the other side of it, the companies that aren't willing to share the more personal stories of their capitalistic endeavors are the ones that then are perceived as uncompassionate. They're not compassionate, right? But there's so much human in business, and that humanness lives in the true stories. Now, of course, the stories can be abused. We've seen that happen even recently, where there was a lot of storytelling happening that didn't all add up, and there were consequences for that. But and of course, I need to read your book now. I want to see it even more of a compassionate.
Yeah, if you need a nap, you can read our book.
Hey. Like the compassion of capitalism happens because of the humans in the work, right? Yeah. And so the only way to bring the humanness out again then is to share the stories of the humans who are doing the work that is driven by compassion.
Mm-hmm. You're amazing, Kindra. And next time that we have you on, because we have so much more to explore, and we have Kasim, the awesome Kasim, in the waiting room, or I would delve into this whole side, but I think it warrants you coming back. I love when we take something ethereal like Chief Storytelling Officer, implement it into Success Magazine, and as a Stellar Collective, which you're the president of and the Chief Storytelling Officer, but how do we convey the value of storytelling to the Fortune 500? And I think a lot of entrepreneurs have these ethereal ideas that have quantitative value. And I think through your own personal storytelling technique, you also can articulate quantitative value that, at the biggest resistant level, which is the Fortune 500, the Tysons and Targets and Berkshire, and even Harvard Med School, which has to be completely skeptical, beyond Facebook/Meta and Hilton. I want to have you back to talk about quantitatively how we can articulate that value to the biggest resistant forces of our capitalistic society. Because I can imagine, I was just, while you're talking and you so eloquently, explaining what you do, I'm also from the corporate realm like you, and I'm thinking, man, if I was CEO of, Starbucks, and this woman came in to tell me about storytelling. Am I really spending my 15 minutes listening to this? And how has she had the expansion and growth within the context and reconciliation of understanding? So we'd like to have you back to discuss the more pragmatic side of business of what you do. But please, everyone, if you want to change people's lives, if you want to change your own life, if you want to change your business and silence the inner critics, rewrite your own stories inside and out, please buy Choose Your Story, Change Your Life by the incredible Kindra Hall. Thank you for joining us, Kindra.
Thanks for having me, guys. I can't wait to chat again.
We will. Thank you.
Thanks, Kindra. Take care.
What a great interview and great impact. So I love that. Man,
I do too.
It's the safer side of things to create a show, Blaine, that you only give people 15 minutes. Because I'd rather people beg for more like they're doing right now for Kindra than sit there going, when are these guys going to finish? We're blessed that most of the people are like, hey, can we have her back?
Get more. I want more.
Speaking of which, wanting more, I'm so blessed to have Kasim here. She is just another extraordinary entrepreneur, CEO of Solutions 8. Also, I've seen her with the traffic and conversion crowd that I've been so closely aligned with throughout the years in digital marketing. And she also has a book, The 7 Critical Principles of Effective Digital Marketing, and is one of the greatest digital marketers of our time. So we're blessed to have our friend Kasim here with us. And I hope my notes are right, Kasim, because he's, I read it as Kasim, but I was told by my group it's Kasim. Are you awesome, Kasim, or
it's awesome with a K, David?
Nice.
Yeah, appreciate y'all having me here. My dad wanted me beat up in high school, so he named me Kasim, and it worked.
It worked. Huh?
Yeah, it's like a boy named Sue, but less TSA friendly. So I get it, from all angles.
Yeah, well, you cannot sit with a better skill and knowledge base than that in digital marketing. And I have been around you with the traffic and conversion crowd, and you have a legacy behind what you've been able to do. My first question is, since you've been around this space so long, I don't think a lot of people understand the advancement that has occurred just in the last 24 months. Understanding the business, where you started the first time that I saw you to where we are today. What has been the most substantial difference between even 2 years ago and today in, that digital marketing space that you're an expert at?
We're finally seeing legislation with teeth. The internet's been something of the wild, wild west since the advent, and the benefit we've had up until this point is, and I'm not trying to throw barbs, but it's nothing but a bunch of geriatric morons, right? That are writing laws.
No offense, Blaine.
Yeah. No. What I mean is if you look at our legislators, they don't understand the internet at all. And I mean, go back and watch them trying to interrogate Zuckerberg, and you see that pretty clearly. And what that means is, for the longest time, they've been staying hands off. And recently, and you see this in California with legislation there, GDPR in Europe, they're moving towards an attempt at putting boundaries, scaffolding, let's say, on the way that we interface with each other online. And this isn't necessarily a bad thing. I'm for privacy, truly. And I think we've seen some pretty significant negative impacts, the Cambridge Analytica scandal, a lot of the hacks that happened, personal information being exposed, et cetera. But the way that they're approaching this is flawed, because the manner in which they're attempting to legislate is near impossible to be compliant with. GDPR is a good example. It is technically impossible to be compliant with GDPR. If you read the way the laws are written, you can't actually execute on what they're asking. The European Union just declared Google Analytics is effectively illegal because of the way that it collects information, which is shocking. So you take that and you put it on a shelf. So we have to contend with the governments. Governments are actually pretty easy to contend with because they're big and they're bulky, and it's the Leviathan, but they're slow moving. And so it's just this big giant trying to crush you, but it's easy to get out of the way. Now, what's really interesting is there's the individual entities, companies that they're playing statecraft. So we saw Apple roll out something called iOS 14, which was an update where they, in one fell swoop, destroyed Facebook's entire marketing model. It was brilliant. It was a masterstroke. And if you were to ask me, and I'm not the only one that thinks this, I think Apple's going to get into the ad game. And before they get into the ad game heavily, they just took out their second biggest competitor with one move, with one button. You now have to opt in for tracking. And the way that they ask for the opt-in too is brilliant. You know, they're like, hey, David, hey, Blaine, do you want Facebook to be able to see everything that you do? And you're like, of course I don't. No. and up until this point, something to the tune of 85% of people have opted out of tracking. So Facebook used to be able to see what you did after you left Facebook. You click on an ad, you go to David's website, you read through a blog, check out a couple pages, and then you convert. Well, Facebook can see all of those things. Now, 85% of that data is gone. And with it, we saw massive, just the annihilation of so many well-performing Facebook ad campaigns. Facebook wasn't the only one to suffer, but they were definitely the biggest. And then you've got Google's Flock, which is federated learning of cohorts, which they just killed and replaced with the Topics API. What's happening is these entities are realizing it does not behoove them to share data, visibility, access. And so you're seeing it's like an arms race. It's like an arms race, but with trillion-dollar corporations. And there's very distinct winners and losers. There's the reason that Facebook rebranded into Meta and is now pushing hardware so hard, because they realize that as Facebook, they're a disembodied entity. You have to visit Facebook through a proxy, through a smartphone or a browser or a device. And if they don't own the device, they're always at the mercy of somebody else's pipe. So they're pushing Oculus. It's also a brilliant move. They're pushing Oculus because they want to be able to own the origination of the view. But and I'm not answering your question, David. I'm so sorry. Forgive me. There's a lot that happened in the last 24 months, and I'm trying to condense it.
Yeah, I know, it's good.
What we're seeing is advertisers.
You also, by the way, wait, Kasim, I just have to tell you,
I talk too fast.
No. We all talk fast. It's a product of thinking fast. But I was going to say, Blaine and I are sitting here because I have a new Apple TV deal, and I'm thinking, I think I went with the right horse.
Oh, goodness.
I think so.
Yeah. It's funny because Apple owns, and this is going to sound elitist, so everybody forgive me. They own the most valuable cohort, right? So like Android is the largest operating system on the planet, but Apple owns the buyers, the influentials, the people that actually move. So even though what Apple took away from Facebook was not the majority of the data, but it was the most important data set that anybody had. And it's why Facebook's entire algorithm changed. They used to have a 28-day click-through window that they had to drop down to 7. And now there's a 3-day delay in their attribution. 3 days in delay. And if that doesn't make sense to you, if you're listening, what that means is you have to wait 3 days to see the true impact of your ads, which I used to be able to make minute-by-minute changes. Now I got to sit here and twiddle my thumbs for 72 hours to see whether or not anything worked, which is it's a complete paradigm shift and change. As advertisers, for the last 15 years, we've been so spoiled. I used to be able to, I had a sniper rifle up on the top of the roof, forgive the analogy, and you could say, hey, I want to target a blind, one-legged nun in Utah that watches Friends. And I'm like, awesome, cool. I can advertise to that person instantly. I can find all 3 of them and put a message in front of them anytime that I wanted to. And now, for the very first time since the advent of the internet, we've moved backwards. We've moved backwards in our ability to see. The data collection, aggregation, utilization it's being reversed. And what's going to happen, I think, and if I actually was ever right about anything, I'd be a much wealthier person. But if I were to attempt prognostication, what I would say is this is going to usurp the hierarchical structure. So right now you have people that have spent decades building themselves to the top. And they've done that. They sit upon a mountain of data that's about to go away. So this is the opportunity to reset. And it's going to happen through, honestly, what you're doing now, quality content. It's going to happen through quality content, community building, because the industry leaders are about to lose the faucet that they've had for the last decade, and all of the commoditization of traffic is about to get just reset overnight. It's going to be really fun to watch. It's sad because it hurts some businesses, but it helps agency owners. So I'm right away.
And people, like you said, that have live content. You know, one of the things people ask me why I do so many lives and have so many live shows is that there is no data involved. It's just a community and an engagement in the community that then can be shared by the community, not by the platform or by the modalities that have regulations. And as long as they give you the ability, which they want, because there's free content for them, and it may be their only vehicles, everything becomes more exponentially valuable, like this show or the lives that I do. And so, man, keep talking fast, keep thinking fast, because we haven't had a guest that's so on top of what they're talking about with data behind it. Go ahead, Blaine. We need your perspective.
Kasim, I love how you're moving this
Awesome.
thing, and I
Wait,
love
no,
the data.
awesome. Remember, awesome. We're not going to
Awesome.
kick his ass. You're going to have to kick his ass afterwards.
Absolutely. It strikes me that what you're talking about is a migration from control of data to a more elegant control of the gateway. And if you're controlling the gateway, which isn't the same as controlling the data, it's actually controlling. David, I mean, when you and I are generating content, that's a gateway move. Yeah, and then selecting Apple as a platform, so the work we're going to be doing. But it's not about the data set as much as it is about actually paying attention to the, and this is why Oculus is such a brilliant play in part, for Meta. It's a gateway move. Yeah. And
you're absolutely
so
right.
I'm not sure. I think there's a question embedded there. So I'm going to let you figure out what the question is.
Well, so here's what's interesting about it is think about all of the parties that are involved in your ability to access this channel right now, right? So you're on a device, you're on your computer, your laptop, your tablet, your phone, your whatever. So that device is a participant. Then that device is connecting through the internet, an ISP. So maybe it's through your mobile provider, maybe it's through Cox Communications, Quest, whatever. Now, already we have this tandem symbiotic relationship, but then you also have to access a browser. So maybe you're watching on LinkedIn, or you're watching through Chrome, or you're watching through Safari, and then via the browser you're watching through StreamYard, which is kind of behind the scenes, but it's so we've sewn this all together, and up until this point that pipe of visibility has been completely transparent. Well, all of a sudden what happened is all these companies started saying, like, why am I giving you anything? So they're playing Alamo. They're like, I'm building a wall here, I'm building a wall here, I'm sending you the minimal viable information that I possibly can, because the more data that I own, the stronger I am. And what's funny is nobody realizes where the power plays are. Google, I own a Google Ads agency, so I'm partial here. People think that Google's like, Google, Facebook, TikTok, when it goes to buying traffic. Nothing could be further from the truth. If you look at the size of the Google ecosystem compared to the size of the Facebook ecosystem, Google is a leviathan. Facebook has 55,000 demographic and psychographic profiling factors. And you're like, oh, wow, that's a lot. Google has 72 million. Google knows, think about this for a minute. Google isn't just a search engine. Google is also Google Analytics. Google's 99% of all front-facing websites host Google. Google is Gmail, the largest free email provider on the planet. It's YouTube, the second largest search engine, the largest video repository. It's Google Apps. Google knows what my children look like because of Google Photos. Google knows where you go and whether or not you speed because of Google Maps. Google told a woman she was pregnant before she knew in April of 2015. This is 6 years ago. Think about the speed at which machine learning moves, based solely off of research and communication patterns. Google knew this gal was pregnant. Google knows who's in Narcotics Anonymous. It knows who's a felon. It knows who's cheating on their taxes. Google knows everything about you. This data there's a reason that legislators are worried about this. This data aggregation play allows them to predict intent. And to the point that Blaine just made, what people are doing, all the major conglomerates in the space, is they're starting to try to compact this because it's a power play, and whoever has the data has the intent, and whoever has the intent makes the money. And I think it's going to be really interesting to see what happens in mass, because this will have to come to a head. And so many of them, Google's terrified of an antitrust suit. It's why it doesn't let anybody use this data visibly front facing. It's all behind the scenes, behind the smoke screen, from a machine learning perspective. So I'm excited, but also really nervous about the way this plays out, because you're going to see major organizations usurped the way that we saw Facebook usurped.
And as we do blockchain and individualized micro influence, which has this democratization not only of business but of data, it seems to me that the individual now even has more power, and we are actually usurping the power from the big aggregate companies, corporate conglomerates, because they don't have the ability to manipulate the information, and they don't have the ability to create authentic frequency or authentic content. And so therefore, exponentially, people who have great ideas individually have much more power to build a community and to monetize their community than even the largest brands on earth that can throw as much money as they want, but without knowing the spectrum of people to communicate with, will have far less statistical success than, and it's a cause and effect game, in my opinion. It's like thoughts are your cause. Well, now the democratization provides great ideas are the cause, not big companies with marketing dollars is the cause.
No, you nailed it, Dave. So the riches are in the niches, and large organizations can't niche down. It's not a scalable model for them. So the more people niche down and the more specific they get with their content, their targets, their avatars, who they're speaking to, the more successful they're going to be. That's why social media has taken off the way that it has, because you get to connect with individuals that on micro levels are aligned with, interests that you have, and in niches that we've seen get so specific and so particular, but whole industries have cropped up around them. It's amazing. It's unbelievable.
And Kasim, we're gonna have you back as well. But I guess I tell you, all I could think about when you said that is Dr. Pimple Popper, right? I market the pro football. I market.
I knew you were gonna go there. I knew you were gonna do that.
It has to, though, because I market the Pro Football Hall of Fame, which is the most popular sport 2-1 in America, and this woman, Dr. Pimple Popper, has more subscribers on YouTube than all of the Hall of Fame combined, because the riches are in the niches. And that although football has many viewers and impressions, and probably the best weekend ever last weekend of the NFL content that's ever been created on TV and repurposed all throughout, yet that didn't help the Hall of Famers. And yet Dr. Pimple Popper still has her Bravo TV show and millions of subscribers. So I want to get more into depth. We have many other shows as well. But man, when we get the real deal on this show, and we're 2 for 2 today, the insight that you gave, I'm hoping everyone watches this. I'm going to again, because you just gave a wealth of knowledge to everyone, and you're not talking too fast. It's that you had to get in all that you know in a very short amount of time. So please come back and let's do some other shows together, man. You're amazing.
Appreciate you both. Thanks, fellas.
Awesome. Great. Love it.
Awesome, Kasim. That's all I got to say. All right. Only one here I feel sorry for is Ashish.
Yes.
I love the content.
Hey, that's okay, Ashish. Tomorrow I'm stepping on stage after John Maxwell and Jesse Itzler. So I know what you feel like right now being the third up here, because these guests have been extraordinary. President and CEO of Bugcrowd, and in this cybersecurity world, again, as Aslam was suggesting, the world has changed completely, but also the responsibility that we all have in all levels, from individuals to mid-size, small, and of course the big companies. This SaaS-based all-in-one cybersecurity platform that you have is going to be the future. And so I'd love to start out with the same question I kind of asked Aslam is, in the last 24 months, you have not only a ridiculous amount of change in the space, but I think even more importantly, from the mass content of TV, movies, internet, the awareness of how important cybersecurity has reached an exponential high.
Absolutely right. Yeah, and the dependence on these digitally connected devices just went up when we went remote, right? It's amazing. You were talking about democratization of data. We think democratization of skills, democratization of access to these skills, and democratization of the learnings that certain folks that can pay high bug bounties for a certain bug, and taking that information and making it available to the rest of the community makes us that much more safer, right? So Bugcrowd, us as a company, have over several hundreds of thousands of researchers around the world. And we bring them based on their skills and their trust level that they've built on our platform to help customers find security vulnerabilities. So think about that. It's Match.com meets cybersecurity meets talent shortage. And we do that by enabling this democratization of all the things we just talked about.
The inability to actually enable that, I mean, because there's been a very interesting rise, not in data breaches, those have significantly been, a part of our life for some time, but ransomware attacks, and you're specifically focusing, I think, on that. And it's one thing to have my data out there. It's another thing to have my data held hostage such that I can't do anything.
Yeah.
What do you? Obviously, it's profitable to do this, but what else is behind this, and what can be done more specifically to minimize it?
It's a great question. We just put together a report. We do it every year, Inside the Mind of a Hacker. How do hackers really think? Because we think about hackers as the digital natives who have decided to become locksmiths, right, instead of thieves. So those are the ones that are on our platform. They morally agreed to find and help customers fix things. In this report from last year, ransomware was absolutely the top thing that customers were worried about, and the thing that we helped our customers resolve. And to that end, I think the key here is just finding things faster, but prioritizing them in a way that the customer knows what to fix. Because there's always going to be bugs in pretty much every software, right? I was an engineer, probably wrote some buggy software that's still running on some of those printers I wrote code on, but it wasn't the benefit of breach was not as high as the cost of breaching that, right? Today, the benefit of breach is huge, and ransomware makes it that much more possible. And what we do is we give that 2-minute advantage, because our customers are looking for people who look at different techniques, use different techniques to find what could be possible for a nefarious actor to create a ransomware situation. But before it can be done, they find out about it and they close that door. If we do our jobs right, and they do their jobs right as well.
And one of the things that I constantly think about is prioritization. There's so many areas of attack, of vulnerability, of different levels of personal and professional exposure that we have. Nobody talks about how do we prioritize the areas which we protect, the areas that we're most vulnerable. Do you have any advice to people on how they make that decision on where to prioritize their resources to protect themselves?
Good question.
Yeah, in fact, we do that for our customers. So we look at the attack surface first, and then we say, what is the exposure of that attack surface and the harm that can be done if that attack surface is taken down, right? So if it's a website with an e-commerce site, with PII data, probably pretty important for folks. So if you find a bug on that, and Log4j was running around right now, as you all might have heard, if you find a bug or you're susceptible to Log4j, that gets a pretty high priority, because that gives basic data to the nefarious actor. We've got hundreds of customers on our platform, close to 1,000, and I'll tell you, 75 of our own customers are used in my household every day. Whether it be a network, whether it be a car, whether it be a refrigerator, switches, obviously computers, telephones. So I can't give you the names of our customers, but you get a general idea. I've got 3 kids. My whole thought process is, how do we make it safer so that my kids' information doesn't get breached, right?
Yeah.
So when we give information to these customers, we make it we make a contextually important prioritization for them, so they know exactly what to focus in on. Because at the end of the day, customers are looking for 4 things: return on investment on their security spend. That's a given. You have to take care of it. Security risk, which is the second thing. The 2 that are always opposing this is time to market and knowing what to fix, right? Because both those things are important to a business. So if we can help them get secure product out to market faster, they win, we win. If we can help them fix the bugs in a timely manner, and this is why I would say to all your customers, when you get an update, when you see a little sign on Google Chrome which says update, or you see your phone and it says you need to update it, please go ahead and update it. That's one thing that you can do to save yourself, because there's people who are working really hard to secure your environment as well.
Yeah, and just just a real quick, and I know that we're running short on time here. The whole Internet of Things phenomena I'll just call it a phenomenon. I mean, we've got more connected devices than there are people on this planet by a significant number. And I mean, I know the smart refrigerator talks to my server. So, I mean, the vulnerabilities there are very interesting, and they're out of sight, out of mind for most people, because I don't think of my refrigerator as a security risk typically.
It is a huge security risk. And Blaine, have you been reading Inside the Mind of a Hacker? Because
Yeah.
last year we had talked about this. So here's the thing.
Yeah.
I grew up in the world of Microsoft. I worked at Microsoft, and we spent a lot of time building an operating system that was very, very robust, right? IoT does not have robust operating systems. So they're trying to get the most amount of power out of the least amount of overhead. So what we find is that the linkages between an IoT device, which is typically connected to some sort of a digital asset, maybe a website, a mobile device, or some sort of a server in your case, becomes an incredible point of entry into insanely valuable information that sits on the devices these IoT things are connected to, right? Yeah. We've all heard about the Target thing. Somebody got in from a HVAC system and got to the point of sale system to get all that data, right? We see this happen all the time. I'll just give you an example. We have a company that does security cameras for the homes, companies, whatever, right? And they had always thought about the fact that the camera's up there. Nobody's going to really dismantle the camera and connect some leads to it and find bugs. Well, one of our researchers pops the camera open in front of the head of engineering, adds 2 little wires, and out comes a P1, which is a priority 1 bug, through which they get access to some information that you did not want them to get access to. Now, this was an ethical hacker, and that ethical hacker did this to make all of us safer. But the point really is that that weakest link can give access to some of the strongholds of data and backdoors that you don't want opened up. And that's what our research customers find.
Yeah. So if you got a ring doorbell, watch out.
If you have anything connected, watch out. Ashish, you lived up to the lineup today, and I already know my takeaway of the day, which is we should have a longer show because these guests have some serious quantitative impact in what we're doing for all of our viewers. And what a blessing it's been to have you here. We'll have you back as well. I think we'll just put a repeat, Matt, who's our producer, on this show.
That's a good idea.
Everybody else does. This could be office hours too. So it'd be good. We could be like the Marvel series, like the next world. Anyway,
I'll tell you what, get some of our researchers on your program too, because they'll tell you the inside baseball. Cybersecurity is.
That'd be fun.
Yeah. Well, we're definitely having you back as well. Bugcrowd, check it out. Website, bugcrowd.com. Ashish, it's been an absolute pleasure. Thanks for joining us.
Thank you so much. Thanks for having me on. Great meeting both of
you.
You.
Wonderful.
I love this show. We were talking today about, we're doing this for TV as well. We have the Apple TV, Bloomberg. No doubt why it's successful, but I watch a lot of content, and I'm blessed to be here because not only do I get to learn from you, Blaine, but also, these guests are just extraordinary, but they don't get to display that amazing intelligence and experience without the right questions. And, it's so much fun to hear you. And I'm like, oh, great question. And then, I love, just the authentic reaction. Hey, I'm curious about that too, Dave. So it's really fun to do this with you. Which is why people should learn from us and through us. learn.blainebartlett.com/LMM. Takeaway for the day real quick, then I got to go jump on the stage here.
You got to get on the stage. I'm going to just go with story. I mean, all 3 of our people today, guess we're great storytellers. And it's through the use of story that information lands, so that I can actually do something with it. Too often talking heads are just tossing out data points without a narrative behind it that actually captures me. So I just want to take my hat off to all 3 of them and invite our listeners today to pay attention to the stories that you tell and how you tell what it is that you think is important from a narrative perspective.
I love it. And mine's related to that. Besides knowing the biggest takeaway that we should have a longer show, more importantly, its lessons are tied to the stories. It's one thing to be a storyteller, but it's not authentic, or it's overselling, back end selling, lying, manipulating, or cheating with the stories. But these are people that are of service, compassionate capitalists, merchant servants. They're of service and of value to everyone. And so I'll take your lesson a step farther and say, not only is it a story to tell, but it's the lessons that we've learned and are able to share and able to hear. So share and hear are so important. Anyway, Blaine, I can't tell you how grateful I am, as always, to see you every Thursday. I'm blessed to have this show, but more importantly, blessed to have you in my life. learn.blainebartlett.com/LMM, the great Blaine Bartlett, joining me, Dave Meltzer, here on Office Hours. Thank you.
But love you. Love playing with you. And I'm going to see you in a couple of weeks.
Yeah, great show. I'll see you next week too. So thank
bet.
you. All right, everyone. I got to jump. I'm here at Growth Stack Conference here in Atlanta, Georgia. The great John Maxwell, Jesse Itzler, and many, many others, Craig Siegel, Jen Gottlieb. Very exciting to be here. But remember, most importantly, everyone, be kind to your future self and do good deeds. We'll see you tomorrow. Thanks.